Welcome to the Building Materials Sales and Marketing Podcast, presented by Mark Mitchell, a sales and marketing consultant who specializes in helping building materials companies overcome difficult sales problems. Mark is the author of the book Building Materials Channel Marketing and a frequent speaker at industry events.
Hello, everybody. This is Mark Mitchell from Wizard Strategy. Today, I've got a really special guest that I'm really glad I was able to get this person on. This is Brian Baker, who was most recently at GAF in their digital marketing department. And I've always admired GAF as the company that I think does a very good job in marketing, whether it's when I look at their trade show exhibits and their the messaging that I see, whether it's their website, whether it's their activity on social media or other things they're doing. I've always just admired GAF. They've never been a client of mine. You know, when I look at them and I tell people, you know, this is an example of a company to follow. And so Brian is no longer with GAF. And I thought, wow, this would be great if Brian and I could just talk about digital marketing and the challenges that building materials companies face with this. So welcome, Brian. I'm so glad you could join us. Please give for the audience just a little bit of your background.
Sure. Thanks, Mark. Well, I've been working in building materials for about the last 14, 15 years. I actually started out at Elk Corporation, and GAF bought us probably around 2007 or so, something like that. And then I was with GAF up until late last year. And even going back beyond that, I've really seen the whole lifespan of digital marketing from probably about 1994, which is the beginning of the open web with the World Wide Web starting. And, you know, those were interesting times. You couldn't do a whole lot of stuff yet. You could put just a very few graphics, and your guys with dial-up modems would complain a lot because of the time it took to download a single picture. It was an interesting world. You know, that was even a world before Google, right? So the only way to get your website found was you'd have to go to Yahoo and fill out their form, and somebody would kind of curate and put your website in there. And, you know, as we moved along, progressively people got more capabilities. Broadband came along, and that brought interactivity and flash, some early video efforts, but video was still kind of expensive to produce and distribute. And we started to see some early social media community type hubs came along. And that's probably about the time period that I'm starting at Elk is just about where all those things have happened. Real social media, as we think of it today, is kind of just getting its start. I think MySpace was probably the big thing at the time there.
Right.
And that's kind of, you know, when we started, that's where they did have a website and it looked nice. And that's what they wanted it to look nice. And that was their key objective. Back then, they weren't really measuring anything. There was no sort of a let's get connected to more folks type strategy at Elk. I was at Elk actually only for a short time before GF bought them, only about maybe 6 or 7 months, I think. So that was a little bit of a surprise. They hired me and said, oh, everybody's been here for 20 years. You'll love it. And then they were mostly all gone in 6 months. So they actually were down in Addison, Texas, and I was sitting there on a floor all by myself one day, and there's a little motion sensor that you got to set off every so often or the lights go out, and I'm sitting there in the dark, and it's really creepy, having a whole building floor to myself. And I said, you know, I'm probably going to have to move up to New Jersey if I'm going to make this work. So I did do that.
Yes. Yeah. Your experience kind of follows along with mine as well. You know, I a little older, so I did, you know, start before there was an internet or websites, and everything was printed, and you just were always printing brochures. And to me, the first websites in building materials, you know, were simply, we'll just take our catalog and put it online. And, you know, to me, about that much thought. I view that a company's website today is literally the foundation of everything they're doing. Like, you know, you have to if you get the website right, other marketing follows the website. If I'm a salesperson and I'm going in to talk to a customer, the language I use should, to me, mirror the website. So it looks like we're, you know, all together and one company. What are your feelings about the role of the website in marketing of building materials today?
5 years ago, I would have said, yes, the website is the central hub. I think it also depends a little bit on who you are, right? Today, you see people building very successful businesses around YouTube, for example, right? That's the center of their operation. And then they just have kind of calls to little portals to buy merchandise and things like that. But they don't, they're not even building these things themselves. They're just using other people's tools. You see certain cases where people are selling through other platforms like Amazon, right? And they're not really doing that much of their own branding because that's where they can reach into and tap their customers. You see people that are heavily focused on image and Instagram, moving product, in cosmetics, things like that. Not so much building materials, at least not yet. You still want to have your own domain name. Certainly, you want to own your intellectual property. A lot's changed, right? You do so much off property now. So with social media channels, with video channels, you do so much in those channels now. Your website really seems to be about what's the distinct thing that your business does. And it seems like a lot of people are coming to that conclusion. Okay, so let's say if I make roofing shingles, people want to visualize it on their house, but maybe they're going to go and buy it online at some other store. So it's this kind of notion of what do we need to do? What's distinct versus you don't have to build everything yourself these days, right? There's if you want to publish videos, I mean, my God, YouTube's built this huge, massive machine that can get your content in front of people. You don't want to have to go and do that from scratch. So think about your objectives and what channels might serve you best. It may not be building a website. It may just be, let's just spin up some quick services to do transactions. And I'm going to be out in front of YouTube every day, hawking for whatever it is I'm trying to sell.
Yeah, 'cause I see some roofing contractors, an example, that their website is a Facebook page. That's their website.
That's even more interesting. So if I was thinking about it from the terms of a manufacturer, where a website is still much more necessary. But if you're a service-based business, if you're a roofing contractor or you're a plumber, your web presence might be your Google My Business page. That might be all you have. You point a domain name at it, and that's where you send people. In fact, a lot of these platforms are wanting to drive you into that model, right? They don't think your website's that great. They want you to go into their services. They're gonna sell you ads and leads. You see that happening inside Facebook. You see that happening inside Google. Certainly you see that with Home Advisor and other folks that have done that. But it's even hard. I know that we'll probably talk a little bit more about SEO, but some of these heavily networked players are sort of smothering out that sort of organic SEO space, right? So it's even hard to get your web property visible these days.
Yeah, I think you have to be more creative to do that. Historically, sales and marketing have not necessarily gotten along. Many times, marketing is the people who draw pretty pictures. They're never somebody that sales or management would come to and say, we have a problem, marketing, we'd like your suggestions how to improve this. So it's kind of maybe viewed as a necessary evil. Like, I know I have to spend money on marketing. I just don't know which part of it is working or not. And so there's a lot of, anecdotal opinions about, like, the boss likes the new website. Well, what does that mean, right? I guess you have a job because the boss likes it, but the measurement to me should be, how did you set out to say, if we do a new website, a measure of success are these parameters, and how are you doing against those? Such as it could be simple as how many more visitors or inquiries, different measurements like that. And I also see more and more where with companies I work with that the salesperson is starting to go, oh, wait a minute. I appreciate marketing is helping me. Like, marketing got me in front of this client. Marketing is now sending me inquiries rather than just a bucket load of inquiries that I have to sort through. Most of them are worthless. They're sending me things in which, like, okay, this person's qualified. This person wants this. This is where they're interested. Here's this stuff about, them in the past. And it really helps me. It's a combination a little bit of Salesforce and we'll say marketing automation working together. But I'm seeing one where it's done right, that all of a sudden sales and marketing are appreciating each other and more and getting along. It's also easier to me for marketing to go to at budget time to go and state their case more convincingly. Like, if I want a new machine for the factory, well, I'm going to have a very dollars and cents reasons why this is a good investment. historically, marketing has been kind of a song and dance act, and it's very entertaining. But I really, we don't want to have any numbers here, and we'll take credit for anything that was successful. Of course, that was because marketing did that. We don't, and historically, we didn't really know if it was. So a long way around here. But are you finding two things? One, sales and marketing working together better? And are you finding it's easier for now management to justify a budget increase in marketing?
Let me come at this with from a couple directions. So I'll just talk about, do they always work along and get along well together? I kind of have had this beneficial experience of getting started in my career just before and as the internet was coming and living through that. And so I got to sort of see how all these marketing departments were operating in the past. To me, the idea that they're going to operate without measurements, or the way that they were operating without measurements, if you want to go to back to the mid 90s or so, I can't even think about living in that world anymore. Right. You do a lot of perception-based things. You go to the trade show. Did the VIP's wife like the booth? She did. Great. And he's got a good relationship with the president, and he said something, and now everybody's happy. And we did a great job. But did that actually produce any business for the company? Right. Is really what you want to get down to. That sort of traditional mindset worked a lot on perception. Like, it's almost like the I don't know if you ever watched that show Bewitched, like the Darren Stevens School of Advertising.
Oh, yes.
You got to make the clients happy, but there's never really anything about. And his wife's always trying to keep everybody happy, and they're volatile, and there was a lot of those kinds of hijinks in the business, but it doesn't really get you to did anybody buy anything? When I think about digital, I'm thinking from a perspective that I'm creating tools that are going to allow me to go out and hunt and kill my own food, right? If I'm not successful, I'm going to starve. But some of that too comes, I owned my own small agency many, many years ago. And I can tell you that nothing is more clarifying than, having your little doe-eyed employees there looking for a paycheck at the end of the week. And, you got to bring something home to feed them.
Right.
So I tend to align with the sales guys pretty well. And I think just because of having had that experience, I'm more able to think in their shoes, right? They got to go hunt and kill something so that they can put food on the table. So when they see, sort of a soft branding exercise or something like that, they're not that into it. They don't always connect how that's going to benefit them. Or when they see a PR effort, they don't always connect how that's going to benefit them. So it's good to spend time with them, first of all, just so they understand how and why you're doing what you're doing. But with digital, you're so where the rubber meets the road in terms of where the business is actually connecting with consumers. I mean, you can see the sparks coming off in the data. Oh, this guy just abandoned this, or this guy went through, or this guy went ever. And when you show the sales guys that, and they can actually see live people on your website moving through a process, moving through a funnel, that's really powerful for them. And when you're actually bringing them into contact with new folks, either through social media channels or right that they normally wouldn't have had, or you can rally 100 people to show up in an event for them, whereas before they were getting a handful.
Yes,
those are really powerful things for sales folks. I always find in the business, you just want to. You want to hear about all the problems, right? Because those are all the opportunities. All the stuff that everybody's avoiding is usually all the best opportunities. So you want to find out what's not working. Okay, you go and you visit this customer, and then what happens? And what do they ask about? Okay, they ask you this, and then you got nothing to show. All right, so then we need to fill in that gap. Or then they want to respond, and we've got no way to book an appointment, or we've got and you kind of work through that process with them to smooth everything out so that they can get their job done. And they really appreciate you.
Well, you bring up a point that I think is critical to be successful in marketing and building materials. And that is to be close to the customer, to be able to interview and talk to customers yourself, whether you ride along on sales calls or you just, you adopt a few customers that you just, are welcome to talk to you anytime, hey, I've got a question. Is this bothering you or this, or, and I'm surprised how many either one marketing people go talk to customers. Why would I want to do that? Or some of them, some surprisingly large companies are literally told you do never talk to a customer. Okay. Do not ever talk to a customer. Okay. And it's like, okay, so how can we really help them? how can we be innovative? And I'm just like, that makes no sense, and I've told those marketing people, well, there's nothing saying that, you couldn't find, an architect or a contractor or builder, on LinkedIn or down the street from you, and just they may or may not be a customer of your product, but you've got a friend who happens to be a builder, and because I find the customers, most customers just love it when somebody shows any interest and are more than willing to give you their time and their opinions. And so it sounds like, you've regularly, when you were doing things, be communicating with the different type of customer that you needed to reach, correct?
Yeah, that was always one of the best case scenarios, is when we could actually go and visit with a customer. Actually, when you can go and visit with them at their place on their site and see how they're actually doing things, how they're actually running. And it's always what you see is almost even more valuable than what they say, right? Because what someone tells you they're doing, what they're actually doing, when you observe them, aren't always the same thing.
Yes, no, and you see other issues that they're facing that you hadn't thought about, because maybe they're not directly related to your product, but you're sitting there going, oh, dealing with our company, we could help them with that issue, okay? Or we should change something in our company to help them. It could be something as simple as how do they get a technical question answered? How difficult or hard is it? How often does that come up? They've hired some new, let's say, Spanish-speaking labor. How do we train them? How to install the product, or how does a salesperson correctly estimate a job, or whatever. I just think that whenever I go somewhere, I see something it connects some dots for me. It's not like, okay, I got to only look at directly, why does this customer not buy more of my client's product? Okay. I want to look in like, what's going on in their life?
Sometimes things that seem to be huge problems for them are things that you can fix very simply, right. Just because you took the time to listen and took the time to go see.
Or sometimes I find that the company is doing something because that's just how they've done business. But because they assume, wasn't that how everybody does business? They don't communicate it or promote it. And it may be how they handle warranty claims. It may be their customer service people. And it's like, well, that's a big deal. I go, yeah, in today's world, that's a big deal. You need to make sure, that your customers understand how important this is to you, right? That you didn't cut half your customer service department, back in 2009 and have yet to replace it. You've shored it up or whatever, whatever you've done. But I find a lot of building material marketing people. So we'll just say on average, every 3 years, somebody decides what they normally do is they'll say, the boss is after me to grow sales. The head of sales. And then head of sales goes, okay, we need to grow our sales. What should we do? And so he doesn't think of a strategy. He tends to jump right to a tactic. And so he'll go, oh, we need a new website. The competition has a new website, so we need a new website. And then that gets, sent over to marketing. And it's like, okay, we need a new website. Go talk to some web companies, get some quotes, and get a website, get a new website. And and I find many times that the marketing person, and talking to companies smaller than GAF, fewer resources, fewer people, maybe less experience, and they're looking at this thing called a website. And to me, many times they're looking at it as this great big project, like I'm going to build this big building with 100 rooms in it or something. And so they're looking at it as the project in total, which somebody needs to do. But my advice to them is, like, if you don't get your homepage right, okay, if you don't get that right, the rest doesn't matter. Okay. And to really drill that into them, what advice would you have to somebody like that's looking at this daunting task of a new website? What would be your advice to them about what to focus on that's going to make the difference between a really good website or just an okay website?
Yeah, I'll tell you a kind of a funny story. I have a theory that bad businesses make bad websites, right? And I think what you're seeing is it's like you're seeing like a map of a mind, right? Of how either
I got to steal that
one.
I got to write this one down.
or how disordered that mind is, right? It's like, so if I approach something as a consumer, and I go, this isn't organized in any way that makes sense to me, you may find that it's organized in a way that makes sense to internal egos or internal territorial interests, or and it's just not mapped to the market. So every homepage you look at, just back off from it. Don't look at the content for a second. Just think of it as a mental map of what that organization is actually going to be like inside. So things that should be communicating well that don't, like, oh, why doesn't this talk to that? That's probably a division in the company, right? One group has this, one group has that. That's kind of the first thing. At least usually when I approach a new website and I'm looking at an existing website, that's the first thing I'll think about, and I'll try to get it underneath to, why don't these things look like they belong together? Why aren't they together? Or this looks like it should be much more important. This looks like it should be less important. So tell me about that. So you almost start with I call it discovery, but it's you kind of really just want to learn how everything came to be, why everything came to be, and maneuver your way around those sensibilities. But really, just to design a perfect homepage, I mean, it's not a difficult exercise. If you know who your customers are, what they need to do, and what the most important things they need to accomplish, ranked with your business, that's actually the design. Just in an Excel list, you can basically design what your homepage should look like, just based on mapping the needs of your customers to the functions of your websites. The customers will tell you what you need to do, which is so funny. And then inside the business, they'll come up with some other theories. But
I think a couple of maybe guiding principles. Number one is in marketing, you should view your job as to be the voice of the customer. You should fight for the voice of the customer. Your job should not be to make an executive happy or some executives happy inside the company. I mean, you may have to deal with that, but if you stay focused on the voice of the customer, you're much more likely to do it right. In fact, I just worked on a client earlier last year that needed a new. I did my consulting with them to identify what their issues were and so forth, and they had already planned that they needed a new website, and they'd already budgeted and planned for that. And so I continued to work with them as that was being developed. And what I thought was brilliant, I don't know why I've never thought of this before, but this particular website, the most important visitor to the website is an architect. So the client went and found a well-regarded architect and paid them to be on our web development team. And so when we would have weekly calls discussing whether it's the sitemap or messaging or imagery or any of those things, the architect was on the call with us. And the architect would be, that's an ugly building. Don't use that picture, okay? Or don't say it that way. Okay, those words, don't say to me quality or environmentally friendly. Okay, and literally sometimes even, can you use a different typeface or just speak? Architects are, very. They notice details like typefaces and sizes and colors and textures and things. And it was. I just thought, wow, if I was doing a roofing website, I would love to find a roofing contractor. If that's who I was, is important to me, to be, either part of the team or at least at some point, maybe after you've mapped it out, run it by them. Does this work for you? Is this going to be a better website or whatever? And it's everybody, they don't want to talk. They go and interview customers ahead of time or something, maybe, and do a little survey or something. And then they are off to the races and here's the site. Okay. And they don't do that. I always find, when I come up with a marketing concept to help a company, I like, no matter how sure I am, I always like to run it by a customer. Let's say it was, in a PowerPoint or a brochure or something. I just want to take a mock of it and say, hey, can I take you through this? Does this make sense to you? Right? Or what's missing or what's wrong, and just there's always some little thing you find from the customer's perspective that can make it better. And back to the homepage thing, the other thing, I've been a big student of Donald Miller, who has a company called StoryBrand. And if you are faced with that, okay, I've got to do a new website, no matter what you think of how great your web development firm is, I really encourage you to get this book. I was so impressed. I spent a few $1,000s to go to a workshop in Nashville and really understand this. And he really brings home the point of, the homepage. And I still see to this day companies I go to, well-regarded companies, successful products. I go to their website and I cannot tell you what they make. Okay. I don't know what they make. Okay. Now, I think they assume everybody knows what we make. We don't have to tell them, right? And then there's also no reason why maybe they're different or I should consider them. They just maybe show this impressive building with some, headline like, Horizons Beyond Tomorrow. It's like, what? It just amazes me, how many companies, do that. Now, a more challenging question is, you're a company, let's say, we'll just say a roofing company as an example. So in my mind, I could have, we'll just say for simplicity, we'll say residential roofing. And so we could say a homeowner is an important audience. They're the one that needs a roof, and they're not going to directly purchase it. They're not going to install it themselves. They're probably not going to go to Home Depot and buy the shingles themselves. And then there's the contractor's important audience, perhaps a home builder, perhaps an architect, and then certainly the distributor. So here's this, all of these people that, are all important. My thing, what I would put the contractor is most important. How do you address that challenge of putting together a website that works for all these different types of customers?
Yeah, so I've seen this tried multiple ways, and I could talk about the pains and pitfalls of different ones. But the conclusion that I've arrived at is, you take a big Venn diagram of all those folks. What you're going to find is 90% of it is the same stuff they all need. So I need a product data sheet, right? And having some technical data is not very offensive to the homeowner. They're going to read what's relevant to them, and they'll not know what the technical section means. And you really take a huge amount of pressure off yourself if you think that way. So if you think that I'm going to create this unified experience that's going to serve most people, and then I'm going to offer a little springboard out for the specific tools that the other audiences need. So,
yes.
Well, actually, even a good one is if I've got a more technically inclined product, like if you get into a commercial roofing system. Here's a piece of TPO that anybody can understand what it is, what it does, and in clear terms. Here's some technical specs, and then I can spring you off to building a roofing specification or something like that in its own little contained area. That seems to work well. If you think of everything as like a springboard with little missions and circuits, you really actually even have got a good framework for your measurement, right? So I've got all these people came in to look at this particular topic. Then they segmented themselves out based on the secondary tools they went to. So, I'm an architect because I'm dealing with specifications, submittal. I'm a installer because I went into how to install videos. I'm a property owner because I went into, right, what are the basic, some basic article about what kind of roof do you need and why. So to me, that's the simplest. I've also seen it tried where you kind of break the website and you say for architects, and you kind of duplicate all your information here in one format. And then you say for homeowners and duplicate over here in another format. And then you say for distributors and duplicate here in another format. And we just don't have time in the day to maintain that many distinct and varied sets of information, especially it could be possible if you have a small portfolio of products. If you've got 10 or 12 products, it's probably not hard. If you've got 600 products, all of a sudden you're in a maintenance and production, this multiplicity of 5 times size of a website. To basically perform the same function in just 5 different places.
Yes. Okay. I want to jump over and talk about SEO and your thoughts about SEO. What do you think of it, the importance of it, and what you've learned about how to do it well?
Well, so SEO, there was a window of time where SEO was a little bit like a silver bullet, right? It would give you the visibility that you needed if it was done well and properly. It was also at that point in time, it was very mysterious, dark and mysterious universe. I'm thinking maybe 2005 to 2012 period. And so you'd go and find these people that were like alchemists, and they were going to quote do SEO, and nobody really knew what that meant, and a lot of people got taken advantage of, and people did a lot of bad things. But today things have changed. So SEO is it's sort of like a housekeeping expectation, right? How you're going to be a good digital citizen. Mostly, we're talking about optimization for Google, right? Search optimization for Google, primarily, secondarily Bing, but Google's basically taken over. And there's a few basic things that you need to do. I can put it this way. I'll tell you the things that you can do and the things that you can't control, and how to think about those. So you can optimize your site on site. That's where you're going to go research your keywords. You're going to make sure you've got titles and descriptions and everything. You're going to follow the appropriate HTML standards for schema. You want to research those keywords so you're using the right ones. That's something that you can control. That's the on-site optimization. Then the next piece you're going to do is the off-site optimization. This is where you got to do a lot of work, a lot of painful work, right? So you've got to build backlinks from other websites and other properties. That means reaching out to people, finding the right places to link to you that are credible. And then finally today, because there's this big question in the market, is SEO dead? And so in some ways it is it's not dead, but it is dying. You are now competing with entities that have this massive amount of network leverage that you may not be able to compete with. So if you're a small service business, you're probably fighting for rank with Home Advisor and Angie's List and one or two other businesses, other directories, right? And then sitting on top of that is the Google Places, my business listings, and sitting on top of that are the pay-per-click ads, and sitting on top of that are now the Google local service listing ads. And so it's squeezing you out of the space, right, with these proprietary services that Google is building. So that is really challenging. I would almost say, if I were going to go into an SEO engagement with somebody today, I would first just look at the network leverage of their competitors and go, here's really the work of this, right? Do we think it's possible, right? Am I going to exceed the domain authority of Home Advisor or somebody else here, or not, right? So you can kind of figure out if you're just going to be pouring money into a black hole pretty quickly here. Not that there are things that you can't or shouldn't do to optimize still, but you may be in a situation where the network leverage is just greater than the amount of investment you're going to be able to put into it. So that's a challenge. I think actually we're going to see, I think you've heard there's probably a lot of antitrust buzz in the Google and Facebook space. I think probably sooner or later we'll see this area come under the microscope a little bit from regulators.
Yes. What I find is, like in roofing, it will say, if roofing repair, we'll say is a replacement roofing or something, there's a few terms in roofing that everybody wants. Every local contractor, every manufacturer, everybody that has any interest in roofing, is chasing this. Whenever you have so many people chasing something, you've got a lot of competition for that. And it's not that you shouldn't, make an effort to see what you can do. But I'm a big fan of, I don't know if it's called long tail keywords or something, but I look and say, okay, what are other search terms that we'll say a home owner looking for a new roof might be typing in that the other companies are ignoring. And so instead of 1,000 visits a day, maybe that term has 100 visits a day, but because you are at the top of the page, you're going to get more from that 100 than you would from the 1,000. And that's one that I've found that for many companies can be really successful.
Yeah, I would agree. I would absolutely agree with that. So that's really the space that, if you look at just roofing shingles or something like that, right? That's everybody's going to start trying to optimize for that. That's where everybody's heaping in for the and competing. not only just for organic listings, but also for ad, right? If you're paying for ads, that's
Yes.
where I've seen crazy markets where people have run up the cost per click into $150, and it's obviously that's too many dollars chasing too few customers. But the long tail really is where it's at in the future, right? So Google and other services like that, homegrown services, are less competitive in that space because it requires a deeper level of domain knowledge. I need to understand roofing better and really know what these people are searching for and what they're asking about. But the good news is as you get into those more focused and niche questions, my sense of that is those people are more and more valuable, because as you're asking more and more focused questions, you're further down the pipeline in terms of your knowledge and your need to get something done. And that's the long tail is also, if you look at a graph, I don't know, just for everybody listening, but you're going to see about 30% of the keywords stacked up in this big spike and this long tail of little stuff. But if you actually turn that on its head, you'll see that's actually piled it together. That's actually 70 or 80% of the activity. It's just that you catch it all in small bites.
Yes.
But it is a good investment to operate on that, because it does tend to produce for you year over year over year. So if you're answering a very specific set of questions around a very particular technology or around a very particular service space, people are going to continue to ask those year after year after year.
Yeah. And if you wrote, a good piece on how to pick a roofing contractor, how to tell if your roof needs to be replaced or repaired, how to make your roof last longer, you could just go on and on and on. And there's people that are, that your other companies don't even see that as an opportunity, and that makes it easy for you to appeal to that, or to rank well. Yeah. Within that. And I think it also, to me, starts say, if one company just has 5 reasons why our products are better. Here's a new project we did, and look at this on this building, and look at this, and so forth. They're just blowing their own horn, which is okay. But the other company is like, wow, the company giving me the most helpful advice is this company. Mm-hmm. They've got the answers to my questions. I'll bet they probably make a pretty good product. So I think it starts out with establishing trust with the customer when you provide that helpful information, and not just like sell stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because you're starting to solve the problem with them is really what you're doing. So your website, even though the website's doing it, it's more passive, but you're starting to serve them, right? You're starting to work them through a process.
So I got two more subjects. One is, what's your take on social media in today's world?
That is your voice as a brand. For a period, right, it was blasting out email, but now it's really social media. That is your brand voice. We had quite a magical experience with that in my last role at a major roofing manufacturer, and we built their audience up to about 300,000 or so people. But the magical part of that was, this was the first time that company could actually put out a message and have its entire audience hear it. So we are doing this, right? We're having an event here, right? And the message actually would go through, and the audience would receive it, and they would communicate and respond. And for a roofing manufacturer, they're not typically making these kinds of investments to have this broad general public awareness. So maybe I know what Nike's up to, but I don't know. I probably don't know what most building materials manufacturers are up to, because those kinds of investments don't make sense. But you could actually collect that narrow audience and communicate to them. And there's a huge competitive advantage to them, even to this day. The other piece of that is, you're not just getting a megaphone there. You're also getting these kinds of amazing surgery tools to build the right audience. So we wanted roofing and building materials professionals connected to us. We didn't want to go after homeowners who are going to maybe buy a roof and interact with us for a little while. We said, well, who's going to need to have an ongoing dialogue with us? So we really focused on building that professional audience with a lot of care. If I can put a post out there about a piece of styrofoam insulation and get 1,000 likes back on something that's boring as dirt, I'm talking to the right people. That was another really important part of this, is you don't just want to build an audience or get people, you want to get the right people. You want to get the people that are going to actually support you.
And what's your take on the different channels, like, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and others? What's your quick take on each of those?
Yeah, so each one is good at different sorts of things. So Facebook is really good for the brand, for example. LinkedIn is really good for the individual person, right? The individual networker. How are you building and networking and getting things in front of your own personal contacts? Instagram is a very visual medium. The attraction there is different, right? So I'm not going to push a bunch of technical data and stats down that channel necessarily. I'm going to push a bunch of beauty shots or people engaged. Twitter is, to me, Twitter is more like of a, this is happening right now medium. So it's really great for live events, event supports, event coverage, and keeping people engaged where something is happening now in the moment. Yeah, so I think they all have their sort of strengths and weaknesses. I think certainly Facebook has developed its own trust problem with its users by tracking every single thing that you've ever done your entire life. We'll see where that goes for them long term. But
yeah, well, my impression is that there's no magic bullet. That each of them, like you said, offers a different benefit, but I also look and say each of them appeals to a different type of person. And so you could have a person who just loves Facebook and doesn't have an account on Twitter. And you can have somebody that's very active on LinkedIn or someone very active on Instagram. And so I think you have to kind of accept that, in 8 of these, you're only going to get a chunk of your audience. And I always say, don't try to do them all. Do the one that works well for you and you can execute well. And then, if you want to move on then to the second one, go ahead, but we're going to take all these on. I think you're going to assume that they're more similar than they are in terms of the content that you post.
Yeah, I would say that too. Try to choose the one that's the most successful for you and drive most of your energy there, because otherwise you're dividing your audience, right? And what I found is to get a kind of critical mass of people so that there's always somebody around sometime to respond and interact. You need about 10,000 or so people. So you want to make sure that you're building up that volume so that when you post something, it's not just the crickets, right? You want to see a level of engagement and a level of response. That takes a lot of effort. And you also want them to feel like, well, and actually, this is really more important than anything. You have to remember that it's about your audience, right? It has to feel like their community. It has to feel like their space where they go to ask questions, where they feel a level of trust, where they feel like you're supporting them and their work. You could use a Facebook channel to just chest thump about the brand and post a bunch of branding folks, and you'll make everybody deaf to that stuff after a while.
Right.
You really
just tune it out.
You really want to make it about them.
Yeah, that's great advice. Next subject I want to touch on is marketing automation. So along comes the HubSpots and Marketos and Pardots of the world, and selling everybody, this is the magic way to grow your sales. Just sign up here, and I found one, there's a steep learning curve to it that they don't tell you about. And then secondly, it requires two kinds of people. One kind of person that I think of as a mechanic that actually knows how to, I can set up an email that will go to these people this way that has this content. Yep, I can do that, right? And then depending on the response, the next thing happens. I can make all that happen. What they can't do is provide content that anybody's going to want to read. And, so I see some companies that do it exactly. Best practices tells them what time and frequency and all these things and all of that, but they have the worst content and it's just meaningless. And to me, it also requires I call it the artist, who's probably a writer, but I call them an artist because they can think creatively about, crafting that all important subject line and the content that's in it. And it takes both. And so my first question is, what are your thoughts on marketing automation? And then the other question just seems like, we're all just so inundated with emails today. It's kind of like, okay, is email really dead or dying? Or what are your thoughts there?
Mm-hmm. So I'll start with the marketing automation question. I see a lot of companies sign up for, Salesforce or Eloqua or Marketo, and they're buying these. I've got to give credit to the salespeople at these companies, right? Because they're great at finding somebody high up in the organization. They've told them this is all going to be magical, and the order comes down from on high that we bought this and we're going to be implementing it. But then, real life on the ground is, I'll be looking at this and go, look, we could actually accomplish what you want to do with some tools that'd be $200. It's really just putting in the work in terms of, creating the content and creating the schedule. And that's what's really interesting is I think there's some kind of, I don't know whether there's a brainwashing conference or something they all go to, but we've had email marketing for a long, long time. And we went through the world where there are all these spammers. All these tools got incredibly cheap and incredibly easy. I want a database market or segment market. And when someone buys a big sophisticated system like that, that's a lot of what their staff understands. It's just basic email marketing. So it's now I've got, a $250,000 a year license fee where I'm going to spend $200, and now I'm sending out emails to an audience that's not paying attention to me, right? When we could have run that experiment in a week or 2 weeks for a few bucks and figured out really what was going on. I also think with regards to just email in general, I view email, it's good for important things. So what do I want in email? I want to get a receipt in there. If I have a service issue, I want that to be in there. If there's a major product launch, I want to hear about that. Or maybe if there's a major event. I think Apple is a great case of judicious use of email, right? They send you something when it's important. It's usually a single topic. There's usually a single clear piece of communication with a single call to action. They're not bothering me too much, right? So somebody like Apple could say, hey, we're going to email everybody a technology news, right? And just, spam the bejesus out of them. But they don't do that, right? Because that would train you to ignore their communication. So I think you have to treat it like, use email like when you would write a letter that something important is happening or there's been some transaction that you need to document. Don't use it like social media. I think a lot of people do think of it that way. I'm just gonna keep shoving content down people's throats until they can't stand it anymore. Don't do that.
Yeah. No, I think that's some excellent advice. Hey, well, we've had a great time here. At least I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope that the listeners, we've given them some things to think about as they continue to move down this digital marketing path where the world seems to be going. Because it's challenging because, there's something new every day, whether it's a new social media app or another company comes up with a better way to link to Salesforce or do something. And the other challenge, of course, is in marketing, everybody's an expert. The marketing person, you can't walk in the finance department and say, I think that you should put this into this expense column instead of that, or they can't walk out in the factory and say, why don't we move these blades over here? I think it would be better if they were in the sunshine or something, they'd look at you like, get out of here. Right. And even going, talking to sales, but for some reason, everybody's an expert in marketing. Everybody has permission to come in and tell you how to do your job better. And that is a continual challenge with that marketing is always fighting. That everybody's an expert. So, but this has been really great. I'm glad we got to do this. Any other thoughts or advice that you'd have to share with people?
Yeah, I mean, just one other thought, or just sort of what's kind of new in the digital space. There are, I think, the legal concerns that are about to hit the digital space are going to remake the internet in ways that we're not used to. These limitations on ad tracking and privacy. Underneath that is the fundamental economic motor that was driving the open internet. So all these bloggers and everybody earning a living off all these ads, that's really what's being disrupted. So I think you're going to see everything kind of falling into walled gardens. I think YouTube's a good example of what the future might look like, right? Like if you're producing video, you're going to go into YouTube. Your job is just to produce content, to not worry about the form factor or the user experience. And I think we're going to be going into a world where content isn't free is probably the mode we're going to go into. But anyway, yeah, just just the end of free unlimited information is what they seem to be working on now from a legal standpoint.
Yes, I can see where it's going that way already with different things like Substack, where you've got particularly news writers that let's say are good news writers, but can't find a job because they have their own opinion, let's say, and they go to Substack and people sign up and pay $5 a month to get their information. And so maybe we'll start to see more of that across the board. And so I think that's something. Yeah. Well, this has been I've really enjoyed our conversation. Hopefully it's been helpful, and I look forward to getting some comments and things from our listeners. And
all right, great. Thanks, Mark.
Yes. And so if you like this, be sure and go and push the like button or share this or subscribe. And I'd also like to hear of any subjects that you would like covered. If you're a listener, what kind of subject would you like to cover, whether it's something I would cover or I'll find a great person like Brian and interview them. So I love to hear that. So thank you, Brian, for being here. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Thank you for listening to this podcast from Mark Mitchell on building materials, sales, and marketing. We hope he gave you some fresh perspectives on how to grow your sales, and will listen to future episodes.